Greg, not to make light of the emotional needs of anyone, but you talked about there's a high bar to get invited into this club, which is great, right? Because there are dangerous circumstances around these jobs, and you need to have the trust and the loyalty of all the people around you. But knowing that there's such a labor shortage, like how do you combat that? Like how do you get new people into the club, knowing that 2022 is different from the 90s? It seems like a really difficult challenge in most industries today that people have to confront.
Yeah, it is. It's not just us. It's not just the ironworkers, or even my fabrication side. The employers that I represent that have big facilities that make the pieces that get erected in the field. It's a challenge. The issue with ironwork in general is there really is no room to lower the standards to fit emotional needs because of the safety and because of the danger involved. There is a way that folks can be better. There's a way that guys have been, and there is significant amount of legislation in place in California that sexual harassment training, DEI training is coming so that guys can understand, you don't necessarily need to insult their heritage, teaching them how to do the job, right? So in that sense, things have changed dramatically, but from a point of getting folks into the trade, what we're seeing is kids that feel like they've been put into a corner with education requirements that they don't have the financial means to meet or even the study habits to meet, based on a number of factors. It could be that is their home life, their domestic life. They just weren't encouraged and supported and given those skill sets, right? And so the shock value is when they come out to a project site, and they learn, okay, here's how much you can make, and here's the potential benefits, and you can see the brotherhood, you can feel it, and most folks are drawn to that. That's why they're in clubs, right? But the physical aspect, I think, is shocking. It's shocking in the sense that, unless you were raised around the auto shops, the wood shops, the 4-H clubs, the FFA clubs, you don't really have an understanding of the physical requirement. You just don't. It isn't like playing basketball in high school. It's not like playing soccer in middle school. It's significantly physically demanding work that most people really have not prepared themselves for. So what I think most of my employers are starting to understand is to have some of the other guys, the older guys, older cadre, identify those kids that are struggling with that and ease off on the throttle just on the learning curve. Maybe not drink from a fire hose right away. Maybe not push them physically to where guys were trying to do that when I got in, to see how many people they could make quit. I mean, it was a badge of honor for a period of time. There's never been an apprentice break in with this foreman or that foreman. They've never made it. And those guys wore that as a badge. Now folks are understanding there has to be somebody to come along behind us and keep this trade alive, right? So you got to change your outlook and at least give folks an opportunity. And I see that's what's happening nowadays.
So you've been on the front end helping negotiate a lot of these contracts and trying to make sure a lot of these safety standards are adhered to. What are those conversations like when you're talking to some of these major project backers or some of the stakeholders in these projects that really don't care about, or I shouldn't say they don't care, but it's not as much of a priority on maintaining all of the safety and well-being of the people that are on the raising gangs or some of the other folks that are working on the iron working side, and they're just, you know what, we've got deadlines, we've got other stakeholders that we've got to satisfy, and we've got to hit all of these things because we need this thing up and running yesterday?
Yeah. Good question. So it's come up. It's come up over the years. I'm fortunate that because of my experience and because of the types of projects that I did, I've been exposed to the big arenas, to the towers, the high rises, the high schools, the small stuff, stuff over water. And so I've got a pretty significant and solid overall understanding of what should happen and what shouldn't happen. And then been involved in those stakeholder meetings and advisory committees at the Cal OSHA level, in Nevada OSHA level, and then even with the ironworkers leadership of the district council and the international. And in that venue, there is constantly a struggle, a tug of war between scheduling and expectation and safety. And so we've struggled with that in certain times where there's a big boom of work. Las Vegas, for instance, in 2006, 7, there was a little, not a little, but one of the largest private projects done to that point in time on the Strip. And we had a massive influx of tradesmen, not just ironworkers, but all trades, because it was 27 cranes up at one time in the Las Vegas Strip during that period of time. And folks came from all over the world. We had a lot of folks come from the Rust Belt. A lot of folks came from states that do not have a strong safety standard, don't have a strong OSHA presence. And if they did, their states weren't economically able to enforce those standards. So there was a lot of those guys came from a background that they weren't exactly the same safety standard and level that the folks out here on the West Coast are. California has some of the strictest safety standards there are, and most of those have been helped either written by the ironworker stakeholder advisory committees with industry stakeholders or the district council and myself, because we're able to get them regulators to understand, here's what we need to do our job. We still have to do our job. You can't factor out every single thing, but we can mitigate the risk, and we can do so through best practice and training. The issue is when you bring in a large group of employees and workers from areas that don't have that knowledge and really think that, well, if we have to do it this way, somehow I'm diluting my trade and I'm diluting how I work if I have to wear this harness, or if I have to put on a safety vest, or if I have to wear safety glasses, guys, they're getting them to understand it isn't necessarily, you don't get any extra ribbons or buttons for going up there and being a cowboy, and getting that A-type personality to understand you're still a badass, you're still doing what you do, but could you just please follow the rules? Because if you don't, you can't stay. So lots of meetings during that period of time. We were able to get the Cal OSHA folks together with industry folks. We're able to get Nevada OSHA to the table with industry folks and the union, make some changes, talk about best practices, identify folks that may have been the really kind of the ones bearing the brunt of some of the accidents and fatalities, and then developing a plan to mitigate that.